Mazes are puzzles that can make you feel like you're just wandering around in circles. Well, what if a maze were made of nothing but circles and also involved the critical elements of precision and timing? That's what you're up against as you try to circumnavigate the circular puzzle platformer Omaze. Welcome to the Playdate podcast, bringing you stories from game designers, developers, and the team behind Playdate, the little yellow game console with a crank. I'm Krista Mergen. Today I'm talking with Gregory Kogos, who made the tricky and addictive Omaze. Slight spoiler alert, while we don't reveal any specific puzzle solutions, we do talk about the overall gist of the game and some of the types of obstacles you'll encounter. Okay, let's meet Gregory.
So I'm Gregory Kogos. I was born and raised in Ukraine, and I'm currently based in Germany. And I'm sole developer on Omaze. I did all by myself, surprisingly. The game is circular puzzle platformer, where you control the circle that is running in the circles to aim the final circle. It's a very circular game.
Yes, you play as a little white circle with a black dot in its center, and you use Playdate's crank to move clockwise or counterclockwise around each of a series of circles, and use the B button to switch between circles. But you have to be quick and fairly precise to switch in the right spot, because of course, new increasingly challenging elements are added to the circular maze puzzles, from obstacles that move when you move to auto-rotation and enemies that chase you. And the number of circles is always changing too. There can be as few as 3 or as many as 15. And in addition to solving the puzzle of each level, timing and precision become more and more important as the game progresses. So like a standard platformer game, you're moving a character through an environment to reach a goal while avoiding hazards and enemies. But each level is also a puzzle that has to be solved, which is what makes Omaze fit the puzzle platformer subgenre. The circular gameplay in Omaze feels really natural with Playdate's crank, so you might imagine that's where the idea came from. But the game actually evolved out of another one of Gregory's creations.
So my background is I was into out control games, which are custom hardware games. People who went to GDC, for example, they know that there is this out control section there where people just make their own games out of custom made electronics. Mostly it's Arduino based.
GDC stands for Game Developers Conference, and like the name implies, it's an annual conference for video game developers. The main conference is held in San Francisco, California. There's an exhibit called Alt Control GDC, showcasing games that use custom hardware or alternative controllers. And Arduino is an open source hardware and software platform that lets users build things by connecting small circuit boards together in pretty much any way imaginable. You can get a kit to build something specific, or just buy the components you need to make whatever you want. It's basically a DIY electronics platform. Anyway.
So I had a game which is called RotoRing, and it was quite successful for what it is, for a hardware game. It has the rotating knob and the button. And it is also a circular puzzle platformer, but it has only 2 rings, not the 15, like Omaze says. And I was traveling basically all around the world with this game to different festivals, even won some awards. And when I went to Korea in Busan, I met Nick Sutner, and he actually played the game and really liked it.
Yeah, this was at Busan Indie Connect, the independent games festival mentioned back in the Whitewater Wipeout episode. Nick Sutner comes up a lot on this podcast, since he helps Panic with games-related business development. Nick is also the co-founder of game studio Furniture and Mattress, and has a podcast called Eggplant, The Secret Life of Games, that you'd probably be into, since it's also all about game development. But yeah, since Nick had played RotoRing at Busan Indie Connect and enjoyed it, Gregory decided to pitch a Playdate version of the game to him.
I saw the Playdate announcement, and so basically my pitch was I just wrote to Nick, I want to make a RotoRing that you play, but only for the Playdate. And he said, that sounds good. And first I got SDK, then hardware unit came, and I tried to make basically exact replica of RotoRing, but for the Playdate, and I failed miserably. It was so disappointing. Mostly I was disappointed in myself because like I thought it is such a good idea. RotoRing, it was made for the Playdate, so it can be just replicated for that. And it turned out, no, it's not. But I sent my first pitch where I just recreated the RotoRing, and like I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel good about my pitch, and I think in that exact moment, Panic was very busy with publishing a Goose Game.
Untitled Goose Game, a stealth puzzle game by indie game developers House House, was published by Panic in 2019. There's a whole episode of the Panic podcast about it if you're interested. But yeah, that was a super busy time at Panic, and since he didn't hear anything and wasn't super happy with the pitch himself, Gregory kind of just figured Panic wasn't interested in RotoRing for Playdate.
I didn't hear the answer from Panic for a long time, and I thought, yeah, fair enough. The game is not good enough. But at that same moment, I basically understood how to make RotoRing, but just take the essence of the RotoRing and its pillars and to make it specifically for the Playdate. So not replicating it, but taking its core and making it appropriate game for the Playdate. And that's how my second pitch came out. And yeah, that's the thing right now. I would really like to make games that I would play. I'm more into simple interaction, minimalistic mechanics that go deep. So stuff that you can take immediately and understand immediately without any instructions, but then realize that it has a lot of depth. And I'm not like it needs to be a puzzle game. I also like rhythm games and just fun interactions, artful interactions. But my thing is to create something that is immediately understandable, but also deep.
I feel like Omaze really fits this description. The feedback is immediate and obvious, and there are lots of clever visual cues.
I feel that this jumping from one circle to another feels pretty good. I have enough of the feedback. For example, this little dot inside of your circle that you're controlling, it goes in the direction of the circle that you will jump on. So it says to you that now you can jump to this circle.
It does, and the movement of the dot also makes the circle you're controlling look like a little eyeball, so it seems to actually be looking in the direction that's now available for travel, which is really intuitive and also makes this little circle feel more like a character or something that's alive.
So this is good feedback for the player. And also the actual gap is quite big. It's actually bigger than the visual gap. So I give the bigger room for the player. So I'm trying not to too punishing.
The gap doesn't feel that big when you're trying to get through it in a hurry while escaping an enemy, but I appreciate that it's actually slightly larger than it appears. But with the platformer element of Omaze being arcade-like enough in its need for precision and timing, why did Gregory also decide to make all of the levels into little puzzles to solve? Why not just make it a straightforward platformer?
It's not enough to just make a platformer. For example, I really like the game Katana Zero, where you need to defeat all the enemies in the room, and you have all this time mechanics that you can slow down. But before that, you need to scan the room and actually have a plan. How will you kill the enemies one by one when you go through this enemy, that enemy? Like maybe you can improvise it if your skills are good enough. But yeah, there is also a puzzle element to planning how you will go through the room. And that's how I tried to make the Omaze levels. Like the visual language of Omaze is very simple, therefore very scannable. Like you can see everything on the level. You understand completely how every circle will behave. And therefore, here is the first puzzle element to it. And then you have to execute. So yeah, I just really like this kind of games myself, and I'm trying to stick to what I like. So most of the mechanics in Omaze, as I said, are coming from the RotoRing. And most of the puzzles and mechanics and challenges were already in my head. I just needed to transfer it to Omaze and to be accommodated by the crank and the two buttons. So for me, the challenge was not how to make it more challenging, but how to make it gradually challenging and accessible. And frankly, I still don't know if I succeeded because I used to play test my games on the festivals and fairs, and I usually see through entirety of the playthrough of the game. And here I saw only how people go through the first level pack, which is probably a third of the game, and the actually is easier third of the game. And then I just need to rely on my gut, on my experience, and on the wonderful QA testers that we have. And I hope it came out good. I also tried to make it easier to start fresh. For example, you tap on some level and you quit, okay? But then you come back to the game and you immediately go to the level that you quit on. So you don't even have a menu to go to the level before. You just bang on the thing that you left, and I think it will be easier to just tackle it. I feel like it is like my experience with making a game. Sometimes I work too hard on something and then I get stuck and then I need some time. And then when I come back to it, suddenly something becomes more apparent. And I hope it will be the same experience with the levels that you stuck on.
And I appreciate that there's no concept of lives or having to repeat levels after too many mistakes. You just keep respawning on the same level where you failed until you make it through. So, Gregory talked about some of the challenges of adapting his existing ideas for RotoRing to work for Playdate, but how did the actual programming go, working with the software development kit?
I don't know. It was surprisingly easy. I don't consider myself a good programmer or coder. Basically, I'm game designer or level designer. But it was surprisingly easy, maybe because I have very specific experience with Arduino, and it is kind of similar. There is this little console, Ardu Boy, and the workflow is, I think it's kind of same. Some volunteers made the libraries, and you just check them out and use them, and yeah, and that's it. The only thing that I needed to learn is Lua, but Lua is very easy, way easier than C++ that I use or C sharp. So yeah, the whole workflow was very similar to me and I didn't have any problems. And also it was very helpful to just ask if you have some problems, just to ask on it was first on Slack, right? First there was a Slack, then now it's Discord. And every time I had a problem, I just asked and immediately had an answer.
Yeah, the developer forum is a great community resource for asking and answering questions. For example, Gregory himself actually shared a really useful tool there that he built for working with synth sounds. So, the Playdate SDK includes a pretty full synthesizer kit, like what you would find in a chiptune tracker. We talked about those back in the Casual Birder and Boogie Loops episodes. The big difference, though, is that with the Playdate SDK, there's no graphical user interface to use to work with these generated sounds. So you have to actually write out what kind of waveform you want and define its various parameters, so it can be kind of difficult to go changing the values for each method, like playdate.sound.envelope:set attack 2.5 or whatever, just to hear small differences. So Gregory made an app that runs in the Playdate simulator to make working with this synthesizer API a little easier.
So it just gives me the sound of the same of the certain ASDR attack, all this delay. I don't remember how it's called. Attack, decay, sustain, and one more.
Release. Attack, decay, sustain, and release are some of the aspects that make up what's known as a sound's envelope, or how a sound behaves over time. Hey, that introduction to electronic music class I took in college is finally applicable to my job. So yeah, Playdate Synthesizer API is pretty broad. You can define what kind of waveform you want, like sine, triangle, sawtooth, etc., and then adjust the waveform's envelope. But you still have to actually write out exactly what you want, which again makes it challenging to experiment with small tweaks. So Gregory made an app that allows you to select a waveform type and then adjust its attack, decay, sustain, and release, plus pitch, step, and length in real time, without having to write each value out. It's really handy, and I think a lot of other developers would appreciate it. There's a link to it in the show notes. And by the way, you can also use the built-in chiptune tracker that's part of Pulp to create music and sound effects for your game, and pull them right into your non-Pulp Playdate game, if it's Lua-based. Anyway, Gregory used the built-in synthesizer API to create all of the sounds for Omaze, in part because he liked the idea of almost every aspect of the game being contained in one big file.
The whole game is one big Lua file, and maybe three images for menu and few images for launcher card. But actual game works in one chunky file, like 3,000 lines, I guess, or 4,000 lines. I don't remember. And yeah, it was one of my inner challenges for I want to make it like I made my Arduino games, just one file. Everything is drawn through the comments, like graphic comments, like circle, line, stuff like that. And the same approach goes to the sound.
And even though he only had to write the code for the game without having to also design and program any hardware to go with it like he did for RotoRing, hardware issues still came up for Gregory.
The first Playdate hardware came with the broken screen.
Oops.
The screen didn't work at all. And because I'm tinkering with the electronics, my first emotion was I'm going in, I'm taking this thing apart, and I will check out what's up with the screen. And that's what I did. By the way, it's very good. Like it's built very well. And I checked out the screen and this little transistor on the connector of the screen, it was soldered away, basically. The soldering just tipped off. And it was too small for me to solder. I don't have this fine tools for them. But after that, after this first emotion, like I need to take this thing apart, when I had this thing like wide open, I was like, what did I do? I might broke it. Oh my God. I had this only hardware that they sent me and I broke it and I took it apart. But then, yeah, I realized, I realized it was actually the hardware failure over there. And I was waiting for the second. I already have three.
Okay, before you get super upset about Gregory having 3 playdates while people are still waiting for their first one, and you may be among them, keep in mind that these were all test units, and yeah, the reason he ended up with 3 will become very apparent.
One is with the broken screen, and I was using it as the controller for the simulator because everything else was working.
Oh yeah, with the simulator app that comes with the free Playdate SDK, you can use a Playdate as a controller for .pdx files.
And the crank, this handle, came out on the first one. So the first Playdate right now is like a zombie Playdate. And the second one, holding up pretty well. The only problem with it is that this actual crank, it's too wobbly. And now it's not metallic anymore. It's oxidized and it's kind of black.
Yeah, there were a lot of iterations to get the crank right, and to treat the metal pieces with a special coating to keep them from oxidizing. I don't know which versions of the hardware Gregory had specifically, but if you've listened to the first episode of this podcast, you already have an inkling of the long and arduous process of getting to a shippable product. We recorded this interview back in November of 2021, so Gregory hadn't seen the final version of Playdate that shipped to customers, but he did have a unit that was fairly close.
The third one right now, it works well. The menu button is sticky right now, but I think that the final Playdate will be spot on. I hope so.
Gregory knows about hardware challenges firsthand and has a lot of appreciation for what goes into making a device that works consistently.
Hardware is hard. It is my experience. When I was making the RotoRing, the one thing how I actually monetize it is I create the replica of RotoRing for the festivals and for the museums and send them. And it's pretty easy. Like it has the button, it has the rotary encoder, and it has the screen from 90 LEDs that I hand solder myself. And yeah, it took me some time to get everything right. So like the button doesn't bounce, the thing on the rotary encoder doesn't fall off. And yeah, there's all the soldering on the LEDs doesn't break. It's crazy. And it doesn't have a battery. And when I think about the Playdate, for me, every electronic hardware like iPhone or iPad or Playdate, Nintendo, it's for me, it's a marvel. It's a miracle that it exists and it's actually working.
Yeah, seriously. And I know he said RotoRing is comparatively simple, but soldering 90 LEDs by hand sounds like a lot to me. So what kind of experience does Gregory hope people will have with RotoRing's cousin, Omaze?
I hope they will have experience of the old arcade games where you just come to arcades and you just play it and you have no idea what will happen. When you play the arcade game for the first time, I think you have mixed emotions. It's awe and frustration because arcade games are very cool in their novelty, but they're extremely hard. And that's what I want to make with my game, but not as hard.
I think Omaze is a perfect pick up and play puzzle platformer for Playdate. I hope you have a lot of fun and don't get too frustrated as you find your way through it. You can find out more about Gregory Kogos, RotoRing, and other things we talked about today via the links in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes coming soon to the Playdate podcast feed.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The Playdate podcast was written, produced, and edited by me, Krista Mergen. Cable Sasser and Simon Panrucker composed the theme song. Additional sound effects were composed by Gregory Kogos and come from Omaze. I also snuck a little bit of Etude by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen in there when we were talking about sound envelopes. Huge thanks to Tim Coulter and Asher Cabrera for wrangling the podcast feed and working on the website, James Moore for making me an awesome Playdate audio extraction app, and Nevin Mergen, who created the podcast artwork and site design. And thanks as always to everyone at Panic. Playdate is shipping now and available for pre-order at play.date.
My English might be a little bit rusty because I didn't speak for a long time. I'm just listening to podcasts and writing, but I'm not actually speaking.
Sein Englisch ist viel besser als mein Deutsch oder mein Ukrainisch. That is, his English is a lot better than my German or Ukrainian.